General Castro and Governor Pío Pico exchanged farewell letters before fleeing to the Mexican state of Sonora. On August 13, Stockton's army arrived in Los Angeles on a post and sent a report to the Secretary of State. That is, California is completely free of Mexican control. Meanwhile, in late November 1846, U.S. Colonel Stephen W. Kearny marched across New Mexico and the Sonoran Desert, crossing the Colorado River. On December 7, 100 Lancers led by Pico, the governor's brother, fought Kearny's army of about 100 men. The wounded Kearny persisted until he died. General Pico kept the hill under siege until he had to establish a defensive position on it, until an American relief force of 215 men arrived. Kearny led a 600-man American force on a 150-mile march to Los Angeles. The Stockton-Kearny Army defeated the Mexican Fourth Army on January 8, 1846. The Treaty of Cahuenga was signed during the 2-hour Battle of Rio San Gabriel, signaling the end of armed resistance in California. The disagreement. Continue reading elsewhere in Mexico. The Mexican army's defeats at Palolto and Resaca de la Palma caused even more political turmoil. 2,300 U.S. troops, led by Zachary Taylor, crossed the Rio Grande and proceeded south to the hard-fought Battle of Monterrey. Both sides suffered significant losses as a result. The Mexican forces were led by General Pedro Dempien as they repelled the attack. The best infantry, even though the Mexicans repulsed the Americans, General Taylor devised an 8-way evacuation plan that allowed them to flee and return in exchange for the city's surrender. Taylor broke the armistice and occupied Saltillo under pressure from Washington. On February 22, 1847, Santa Anna personally marched north to fight General Taylor with 20,000 men. The 4,600 Americans added entrenched at a mountain pass called Buena Vista. The Mexicans suffered desertions on the way north and arrived with 15,000 men in a tired state. Knowing that he still had a numerical advantage, he demanded the surrender of the U.S. Army, but was refused. As a result, the next morning, Santa Anna attacks, flanking the U.S. positions with his cavalry and some infiltrators. The steep terrain that comprised one side of the pass, while an infantry division launched a frontal assault along the road leading to Buena Vista. Due to their numerical superiority, the Mexicans had nearly broken through the American lines at several points. Despite the fact that the initial reports of the battle, as well as some propaganda news, credited victory to the Mexicans and set up an attack the next day, Santa Anna retreated after hearing word of rebellion. Some military historians agree that if the Mexicans had gone through, the U.S. Army would have been defeated. With their final attack and an important detail for the U.S. to have success in the war against Mexico. What is the U.S. Navy's naval presence across Mexico's coasts? The U.S. Navy cleared the way for U.S. troops and supplies as best they could, particularly to Veracruz, Mexico's main port. Even before hostilities erupted in the disputed northern region, the United States Navy erected a blockade. The U.S. president did not send reinforcements to Taylor's army in order for them to continue their advance. Instead, he dispatched a second army led by General Winfield Scott. He was transported by sea to the port of Veracruz in order to launch an invasion of the Mexican heartland. On March 9, 1847, the first major amphibious landing in U.S. history takes place in preparation for the war. The city responded to the extended barrage as best it could with its own artillery, but due to the numerical superiority of the Americans, the Mexicans surrendered, and the goal was clearly the capital. On April 2, 1847, Scott marched westward with nearly 9,000 troops towards Mexico City. Santa Anna had established a defensive position around the main road about 15 miles northwest of Eric Cruz at Cerro Gordo. Santa Anna had entrenched himself with 12,000 troops and artillery trained on the road. Scott was supposed to appear and catch him off guard. However, because General Scott had sent 2,600 cavalry troops ahead, they arrived at the pass on April 12 and were fired upon by Mexican artillery, revealing their positions. The Battle of Cerro Gordo began, and the Americans won and continued their advance. Despite the fact that the guerrillas harassed the American troops, General Winfield Scott advanced on Mexico City, the capital, which was delayed by a series of battles around the right flank of the city defenses. American victories at the Basil of Contreras and the Bachelor of Churubusco Peacenega. Peace talks began, but they failed on September 6, 1847. Following the battles of Molino del Rey and Chaltepec, as well as the storming of the city gates. After the capital was occupied, Scott was appointed military governor of occupied Mexico City. His victories in this campaign elevated him to the status of American national hero. Desertion was a major issue for the Mexican army, which was depleted on the eve of battle. The majority of soldiers were peasants who were loyal to their village and family, but not to the generals who conscripted them often when they were hungry. Ill-equipped, only partially trained, and never well-hay, the soldiers were despised by their officers and had little reason to fight the Americans. Now that the United States has achieved far more than the territorial gains envisioned by invading central Mexico, because of its dense population, the question of annexing Mexico itself was raised, but many of us were opposed. This idea because of cultural differences over extension and the massive instability it would cause. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gave the United States control of Texas, all to California and Nuevo Mexico. These territories were later organized into other states. In exchange, Mexico received $15 million, approximately $443 million today, which was less than half of the amounts the U.S. had previously attempted to offer Mexico. The areas were sparsely populated, resulting in such a low cost for the U.S. with Texas and the succession from Mexico. The United States controls over 900,000 square miles of land. The Gadsden Purchase was another purchase made by the United States in order to repair the current border between Mexico and the United States.
Thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed this video and will share it with others to help those in need. Subscribe now for our next video.